to you welcome to all this webinar titled Law, Gender and Human Rights, a Contemporary Trend, organized by Odisha State Open University. We are privileged and honored to have Professor Dr. Arka Kumar Das Mohapatra sir, our Vice-Chancellor of Odisha State Open University, as the chief guest and chief patron of today's webinar, and Professor Dr. Tapan R. Mohanty, Dean, Distance Education Department Center, and Professor of Sociology of Law, National Law Institute University, Bhopal, as the chief speaker of this webinar. We are also have our esteemed Register Sir, Professor Manas Ranjan Pujari, Comptroller of Finance, Sri Nalin Rajan Sadangi Sir, with us this afternoon. Once again, I welcome you all. Let me brief the agenda of today's webinar. We will start this webinar with e-lamp lighting ceremony and chanting of sloka. Welcome address and introduction of guest by Ms. Sangeeta Sahin, academic consultant. Address by the chief patron of today's webinar, Professor Dr. Arka Kumar Das Mohapatra sir. Address by the chief speaker, esteemed Professor Dr. Tapan R. Mohanty sir. A brief question answer session. Presentation of moment by our esteemed Register Sir, Professor Manas Ranjan Pujari, and vote of thanks by Sangeeta Sahin. Respected dignitaries, we will have our traditional lamp lighting ceremony as a tribute to the goddess of knowledge. Let us begin with the event with e-lamp lighting ceremony. I am requesting our technical team to please light the lamp on online mode. I invite all the dignitaries and participants for the same.
Kurutvam kalyanam arogyam dhana sampada shubham kurutvam kalyanam arogyam dhana sampada Shatru buddhi vinashaya Deepajyotir namostute Deepajyotir namostute Shubham kurutvam kalyanam Arogyam dhana sampada Shubham kurutvam kalyanam Arogyam dhana sampada
Thank you. The goddess of knowledge may bless of us. I would like to invite Ms. Sangeeta Sahin, academic consultant, to introduce our guest.
Thank you, Soumya. Good afternoon to all. Thank you, Soumya ma'am. Good afternoon to all. Let me take this opportunity to introduce today's dignitaries. I am Professor Arka, Honorable Vice-Chancellor of Odisha State Open University, as the Chief Patron and Chief Guest of the webinar. Professor Mohapatra is a renowned researcher, distinguished scholar, and erudite academic with more than 33 years of teaching and administrative experience. He is having a long history of academic excellence, much of which is beyond my comprehension, simply because of the varied exposure and experience he is equipped with. Just to mention a couple of academic achievements for the benefit of the participants, he has guided more than 90 PhD scholars and written a number of papers and articles in international peer-reviewed journals and books. Amongst his book, International Accounting has been widely acclaimed by the academic arena worldwide. Before taking the responsibility of Vice-Chancellor of Odisha State Open University, he had been the chairman of PG Council, and Vice-Chancellor in charge of Sambalpur University. As I have already mentioned, his academic and administrative acumen and excellence need no introduction. From the very peak of his tenure as VC of Odisha State Open University, his single most agenda is to bring good name to the university and ensure quality. Under his able mentorship, OSOU will definitely touch the pinnacle of success and glory. He is a strict disciplinarian with a compassionate heart, a man with humility, uprightness, and integrity. Our chief speaker for today's webinar is Professor Tapan R. Mohanty. He is the Dean Chairperson of Center of Socio-Legal Studies and Professor of Sociology Law at National Law Institute University at Bhopal, one of the premier law schools of the country. During the last 2 years, he has worked extensively in the area of globalization, tribal development, and culture of consumption business, sociology of law. He had 4 major projects: National University of Academy and World Ministry of Environment and Forest, National Government Fund for Population Activities to his credit. Diverse issues like educational management, Bhopal gas tragedy, engendering criminal law, implementation of preconception and prenatal diagnostic techniques act, and alike. He has also conducted programs for different categories of professionals, which includes lawyers, judges, legal officers, and executives of private and public sector companies. He has more than 20 research articles to his credit, published in international and national referred journals. He is a recipient of Erasmus Mundus Fellowship from the European Union and worked on lifelong education, where he focused on the use of information and communication technology on developing skills among adults and professionals. He has traveled to many countries like Tapan, Dharamshala, Honolulu for various academic assignments. He is the member of State Supervisory Board of Implementation of PCPNDB Act in Madhya Pradesh, a former member of Executive Committee of NLIU Bhopal. He is a life member of Indian Sociology Society, Indian Society of Criminology, Indian Anthropological Association, and member of Research Committee of Sociology of Law at International Sociological Association. Now, I would like to request our Honorable Vice-Chancellor to enlighten us with his findings. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sagupta, and also Soumya Sucharita Dr. Pratap Mohanty, and other members of the team for organizing today's webinar. At the very outset, good afternoon to you all, and welcome to the distinguished speaker, Professor Tapan, I suppose, Ranjan Mohanty. As Sagupta was reading out the profile of Dr. Mohanty, it's extremely, rich, and this itself speaks the richness of the resource person and the deliberation and the talk that is going to follow. I know, and before I proceed further, I also thank Professor Dr. Tapan Mohanty for accepting the invitation, and all the members who have actually done the hard work to finally make this webinar a possibility, and finally to making it possible. They deserve appreciation. I'm joined by our registrar and also the finance officer. So I welcome them as well as all the viewers, the listeners. We have been conducting webinars on different occasions to sensitize not only our internal people, both teaching and non-teaching, who are associated with the university, but also we are trying to reach up to the society, where we can also disseminate the knowledge that we acquire or we have. And by virtue of these kind of webinars, we are able to reach up to them and to rather also make them aware about the contemporary topics and the discussions which are going on around. To that extent, today's topic, law, gender and human rights, a contemporary trend, is an extremely important topic. I do agree that I am not a legal expert, but whatever minimum law that I need, and I rather understand and I practice, I do that. But then since the expert is there, I would rather expect from him that given the vastness of law and the scope of human rights, and that international human rights and equal amount of rules have also been framed in India, and that too involving gender, although gender has a different meaning, but it is as good as synonymous with that of women. And therefore, most of the discussions that I have seen, which remains focused around the discrimination, the injustice, and exploitation, which are being made to the women folk. Therefore, I expect that Professor Mohanty would be able to make our viewers, the listeners, appreciate the rules, law that is needed for our at least day-to-day life, because the way society is moving, the way things are being reported in the media with regard to the violence, with regard to the discrimination, with regard to the exploitation, I think today's topic would be able to focus on some of these issues as to how and why this thing is happening, despite the fact that we have law, we have also the fundamental rights provided to us in the Constitution. But then when it comes to practice, when it comes to reality, we find that very often it is being violated. Whether it is in the organization, it is in the house itself, I mean the domestic violence, or it is in the professional field, as well as in the society as a whole. So I know that the expert is here, and I do not want to take more time on this. I just expect that besides all the discussions that Professor Mohanty might have actually planned about, but maybe certain minimum law that must be actually injected into the minds of the listener, so that they will be more careful about their conduct and behavior when they are working at home, in the organization they represent, or when they are moving around in the society and living a life or decent life for that purpose, so that they become a more refined individual in the society. I know I have a pressing engagement. In fact, there's a meeting, another prefixed meeting at 4 o'clock that is again in online mode. So I'll not be able to really continue in this webinar, certainly beyond 4 o'clock. So I regret for that I'm not able to enjoy the entire session. But then I expect that things will be much richer for every one of us to experience. So with these words, I thank all of you and of course extend a hearty welcome on as the head of the institution to Dr. Professor Tapan Mohanty. Thank you so much. It's over to Sagupta.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words. Now I would like to request our esteemed speaker, Dr. Tapan Mohanty, to throw some light on the topic.
Thank you very much, both Soumya and Shagupta, for that beginning the program. So commencing good is half good. And I would also like to place and record my sincere appreciation of the Honorable Vice-Chancellor, Prof. Mohapatra, for briefly but brilliantly outlining the issues concerning with today's webinar and what he is expecting from me and what is expecting from you, all the audience as well. So that's a very nice way of putting things into perspective. And since he has already set the tone, I had very limited role of maneuvering it. I would follow the pattern that he has narrated and the narrative he has created in discussing today's program. I'm also thankful to the audience that includes the Honorable the registrar and the finance official and all the members of the distinguished faculty and all people those who have joined us online today. I though personally would have been very happy to have an offline program, but as you see, post-corona and post-digitalization of society, we are increasingly depending on the transformation of and translation of ideas through the online mode. And it is in this context I would put forward my views regarding this issue of law, gender, and human rights, a contemporary trend. Sometimes people would say that these three of them are both unique and vast issues on themselves. When I speak about law itself, there would not much time left to discuss any other thing. So is human rights and so is gender. So I am aware that I have taken a very onerous responsibility, right, in discussing the issue. And it is as good as the onerous responsibility lies on the shoulders of the Honorable Vice-Chancellor in steering this new and nascent university in its enormous capability and the responsibility that is thrust upon him in a state like Odisha, where we would require the much needed impetus in knowledge society to put forward the vision of developed India through educating them, and especially higher education. So in the same way, it is also important to discuss these issues which are critical to human survival, which are critical to human development, and which are essential to develop a sensitive mind. So it is in this perspective, in the context, we would say that why do we talk about gender and why we talk about human rights? And as I said, are they different or are they integrated? In today's world, if you look at the focus is on interdisciplinary approach. And the focus is, as from statistics you know, we often in social sciences use bivariate and multivariate analysis. And what is also known as triangulation, third dimension, that three things bring together. And without bringing them together, if we use them as separate entities, sometimes what happens, we create enriching and self-fulfilling holes. or parts rather than putting them together as a whole. Those who studied social sciences and especially structuralism, they would say that the structure itself is enough. But sometimes the structure is not sufficient enough to explain their reality. Because in order to understand the reality, you need to understand the functioning. So when you say human body harmoniously constructed, they would simply mean bones. They would not simply a skeleton. So in the same way, unless until you take into example an analytical framework of understanding dimensions of law, gender, and human rights together, it may not be easy for us to comprehend the reality and their importance and impact on society. And hence, I tried the most difficult task of bringing them together and provide a perspective. Of course, in such a attempt, I may not be able to do justice to all of them, but as it happened, it's a canvas. So I would just make some few hard process here and there, so that to give a skeletal but functional understanding of today's topic. Now, sometimes we say I was listening to both Vice-Chancellor and both our academic coordinators giving my examples and describing my qualifications, my abilities and concern. I was smiling to myself, but the simple reason is that this inconvenience that was heaped on me happened twice in life usually. And in fact, once in life and once after life. So once as an what is called as an eulogy for a bachelor when he's getting married. And second comes as an elegy when the person is no longer there. So both times we always give such high-sounding statements about individuals, but fortunately or unfortunately, I do not believe that all is inconvenience that, as he said, are I worthily or deserve them. But nonetheless, this is also a way we look at the dimensions of social interaction. Because why we do so? Very simple thing. We do so because we are interested in enhancing the dignity of an individual. We also put in a pedestal where he would be comfortable to discuss with us. A little bit of praise near and there would not matter much, unless, especially if it is intended to generate a sense of energy, a sense of purpose, a sense of belief in a person. And he said, look, if I am given such a dignified pedestal, I must do justice to the work. Unfortunately, that same is not happening in our day-to-day life. There are so many restrictions in there. There are so many categories are there. There are so many limitations are there. There are so many burdens are there. That the enormous human potentiality doesn't find a mechanism to express itself. And hence the topic, today's topic, remains very, very relevant. One dimension he would say, like when you say about gender, as the Prof. Mohapatra was telling, that we often look at gender and women together. Of course, when you talk about gender, a large part of it comes about women, but it's also now including transgenders. When we look at human rights, we look at LGBT communities, LGBTQ, and a lot of things are added to that today. So when you say about gender and when you say about women, one must understand the distinction. Because when you say mere women, we look at especially a category in physiological sense as a sex. So sex is a physiological category, a physical attribute. But when you say gender, what do you mean actually? We mean it's a social category. Now you might ask me, sir, how that is defined? Well, a woman is distinguished from a man because she has the enormous ability to reproduce. That's a physiological trait. That's a physical characteristics. But when we say, for this period of time, she remain pure, or for this period of time, she is polluted, then that is social construction. That you say she should do this, assistant to that. And in a patriarchal society, the rules of the game are decided by people who are not actually playing it, but they're party to determining it. And that brings into the question what we call the dynamics of power. Right? So the dichotomy between these things, the gender, and the power dynamics in it makes it interesting to study, because many of the things which we do or which is heaped on us, not because of our physiological characteristics or physical attributes, but rather they are thrust upon us as a part of our social categorization, as a part of our social identity. And sometimes these identities are, depends on the sharing of benefits and burdens. And in case of women, mostly it is about more of burdens and less of benefits. And if that is so, what do we talk about it? We use two words to describe them. One is exclusion. And since I am trying to put it in the context of law, I would say it I will try to make it interesting, because many of you may not have this ability to understand law or examine law, because you are not primarily trained in law, or your exposure to law is very limited. And that is why sometimes I say teaching about law, talking about law is very dangerous, because both the types of law that I am come across are actually really dreadful. One is called, we call outlaw, who are criminals, and second is in-law. I may not say them criminals, but they are actually difficult to deal with. So therefore, when you think about law, it creates actually some, apprehensions in mind. But nonetheless, in today's world, we cannot live without law. We can certainly live without in-laws, but certainly living without law is impossible thing, because law itself is a parameter of development. So, if we see somebody like Aristotle, two most recent writers like John Rawls or Nose, Amartya Sen, you will find there that Martha Nussbaum, there's a description of how law has tried to bring a degree of certainty, a degree of regulation into us, and making us better, human as a civilization, as society. So it is in this context what you say that the people, what law actually meant to do. Now, when we are living today, is the most powerful organization called state. We are born into a family. So family and state, as sociologists would say, are social institutions. But what is the roles are different. For instance, when you do look at state, and what do you find today? Everything is governed or determined by the state. Former director of London School of Economics and one of the generation sociologists of our time, Professor Anthony Giddens, calls that the enormous power and capability that state has makes it to control everything. And he calls it the dialectics of control. And not to say an euphemism, we say from womb to tomb, from cradle to grave, all your activities are determined by the state. So when you were born, you need a birth certificate. When you die, you need a death certificate. Now, between the two certificates, you have all other certificates for employment, for education, for travel, all of certificates. And who does this? Even your identity, whether it is from Aadhaar, whether it's from PAN card, whether it is from office identity, or the electricity bill, the telephone bill, but you are actually giving an identity, and that identity is given by the state. And that's because you are citizens. Now, when such identities are given, and it's enormous power of the state can deny somebody. In fact, if you are a student of sociology, a student of political science or economics, you would have heard the name of Max Weber, who would say the state is the organization which has absolute monopoly over legitimate violence. Now, as anthropologists, sometimes we define state as an organized political community, because most of our activities are political. And if you look at Aristotle, he said man is a social animal. And when it's a social, it's political. And interestingly, we call Aristotle as father of political science, not sociology. Though he said man is a social animal. So that means he had found inherently the linkage between sociology, between social and political. Right. And the expression of the political he finds in the state. So most of the time we think how state is active. So the power that state has given, or it is exercising, And if you're Hobbesian or believe in the writings of Thomas Hobbes, who would set up an absolute state, and in his writing the book, which is called as Leviathan, it's like a monster. So state has absolute power and has, Max Weber says, monopoly over legitimate violence. Now, whether it's state power, what rights, what things it will give into individuals to conclude, to do their day-to-day activities. And that included the activities of talking, interacting, managing affairs of life, production, distribution, and exchange, what is called economic activities, political activities. So how such rights will come? We call them as rights, discourse on rights. Because the individuals, we also have to do certain things. And the state controls everything, that where we'll go. So therefore, there was a need to do two things. Protect the individual's rights, protect the individual's individuality, promote the inherent capability of a human being to express himself, which is called as freedom. So if you look at Indian constitutions, we have fundamental rights. Some fundamental rights, like I said, freedom of life, freedom of movement, freedom of expression, speech, writing, these are freedom of expression. So we need certain fundamental freedoms. We need certain autonomy. But there are certain things that are curtailed by the state. So you have to maintain a balance between a powerful state and a powerful individual, or autonomous state and autonomous individual. And these spheres are continue to struggle. So that is why we created actually law, to mediate between the two. Big state, as a king can do, no king is above law. There was a discourse earlier. No, there's a debate between now in the 18th century, 16th century in England. You talk about who is the more powerful, law or the king. King said, how can I come under law? King James I said, how can I come under law? Because king is the vicar of Lord. हम लोग कहते ना in Odia Chalante Vishnu. No, we call him Thakur Raja, Jagannath Sevak, and he's like God. Chalante Pratima Bhavan. Right? If he is like God, then how can he come under the law? So he has to be beyond law. But then she said, no, nothing like that. Law is absolute. So everybody should come under it, now, including the state, including the king. Now there is no kings, but there is state. So the idea of creating a law, and what is law, I would say, and I would not want to give a definition, but generally, to help you understand it, capture the idea. The law is a set of rules and regulations which provides liberties to individuals while empowering the state or facilitating governance. So in the administration of justice, we need to have a law. And why is a law? Because what is the end? End is justice. If you look at Mahabharata, so it is not, they created rules. After sunset, there would be no war. Suryasta kyun nahi ho raha hai? Why this sunset is not happening? That's the rule material. Because once sunset happened, the war will stop. That's the rule. We call rule of the war. Even there is a war, that is the rule. So that's the rules. But beyond the rules, what do you find? Sometimes the rules have to be changed to achieve a greater end. Right? Sometimes we say our Lord Krishna has maneuvered things, whether it is the way of bringing cloud to create a sunset scenario to kill Jayadratha, or asking Arjuna to kill Karna while he was repairing his well. So even the rule is exploited. But what is the rules? Our law is not important. What is more important is the justice. That is why the Gandhari's line, Akshay, as I say in Odia, Akshay hu punya jagate dharmar hai jaya. And that is the same line is written in the Supreme Court of India, insignia. Yato dharma tato jaya. No, somebody asks people, have you gone to Supreme Court of India? You look what is written, where is this statement come from? Somebody said, is it Krishna saying to Arjuna? No. It is Gandhari who is saying that. Again, a woman making one of the most important statements in Mahabharata. Yato dharma tataya. Wherever there is righteousness, I don't say dharma is religion. Wherever is righteousness. And I say here, dharma includes justice. So the idea of doing justice. And therefore we create law as a mechanism. So in jurisprudence, we say law is a means to an end, and that end is justice. And law consists of rules. Now, whether such rules will help in what? Achieving what are the essential of to being born as a human. So people say their gender rights, their child rights, their labor rights. Many years ago, there were people concerned about, when Marx wrote his magnum opus, capital, or what is called this very small but powerful work, what is called Communist Manifesto or Manifesto of the Communist Party. He writes in quote, workers of the whole country unite, you have nothing to lose. Plastician and plebeians, prince and princess, no, accept the change, accept your change. So he made a clarion call. And the writing is that either to exist in society, the history of class struggle. Right? I am not a Marxist to say that, but whatever said in the fact, you need to understand. And there is this dimension that you understand of what? That there is a labor right. So he talks about equality, about labor rights. And much before, even Western civilization. And when Indians, we had also about such concept of equality of human being. Respect to the motherland. Right. And nothing can be more powerful than today we talk about globalization. Thousands of years ago, our great seers wrote very beautifully, Vasudevam Kutumbakam. Now, if we'll ask any of you what are the first line, so you may not be able to say that. And where it has come from also, you will not say that. Right. So the first line is not like this. Ayang nijo paravati ganana laguchetasam udara charitanam tu Vasudevam Kutumbakam. We only say Vasudevam Kutumbakam. But if you say, what are the unit of human beings? There also lies the facts. He says, what are the human beings who are they? And in another sloka it says, Pita Deva Maheshwara Mata Parvati Devi Bandhava Manuja Sarvang Govanang Nivasang Govanang Trayam. So my father is Mohapatra Lord, great Lord. My mother is the goddess. And therefore, since everybody is human being, that is why we say Manushya, Manu. So all we come from Manu, not the Manu who was written Manusmriti. Vaibhasutta Manu, from where we talk about, from Pralay's time. I don't want to again get into that mythology. That's another voice of Mr. Patnaik. He would do that. But I want to tell you the general. When you think in the context, when you understand that we are the human being, understand as a human being, I am the child of God and Goddess. Unfortunately, that eclectic to the Christianity, who believe, no, even for him, the Jesus was a child of God. But here in Hinduism, in our mythology, everybody is a child, is a replica of God. Therefore, whenever we touch somebody's feet, accidentally we said Vishnu. Why? Because you are recognizing the not only inherent potential of, but the reflection of the consciousness of super consciousness in the human body. What such a tradition, such a great understanding has also come down to the drain today because of the practices we do, not theory, but the practices that we do. So therefore, the right when talk about gender, so look at how women happen. This we read from. Many years ago, when as a human rights discourse, we talk about why it is human, because they talk, okay, fine, gender is fine, child is fine. They said, no. We not look at those things. We look every human being the same framework, and therefore 1948 in Universal Declaration of Human Rights, they said all men are born as human, and therefore they are entitled to same rights as available to all of them. No discrimination shall be made. Now, in a constitution, what you have done, we have brought it into the question of right to equality, Article 14. So the state shall not make any discrimination between the citizen on the basis of caste, class, gender, religion, region, language, ethnicity, and so on. Now it said it puts upon the responsibility on the state Because in today's world, if I look Navin Babu Odisha, you have the Kalia Yojana, you have all Yojana, who is giving? State. So he said, state shall not make discrimination. Now, no, don't ask me, sir, why the Kalia is given to the, to the Krisak or the farmer and not to the others. That's different. Like, why that discrimination? But the idea is that destroying state giving a patronage. And even if when there is society, for example, the ancient seers would say, Sarve bhavantu sukhina. The first, everybody should be happy. Sarve santu niramaya. Everybody should be healthy. Sarve bhadrani pashantu. Everybody should think good things. Now, all this means what? That we had created an agenda of governance. But where is that today? And this idea is that we, as human beings, we create a distinction, primarily in the Indian society as a form of caste, in Western society as a form of gender, in class, universally as a gender. Women across the world are unexpected. Whether it is American society, look at the type of the things happening in America, in Europe, in Africa. In Africa, there is a practice called female circumcision. So women in across the world, in India and South Asia, are in Arab countries. So much development. Now, in terms of financial, that's why you look at the big skyscrapers, big buildings, houses. But look at the status, the percentage of people who are literate, the percentage of people, women who are literate, who are in higher professions, who are into decision-making processes. So money or not money doesn't make an issue. Unless until you change the structures and patterns of the social understanding, it will be possible. So therefore, as human rights discussion talk about, and interestingly, when you look at human rights, many years ago, it was actually in 1948, it was an Indian woman, Indian person, who had said, no, we look at don't talk about man. It is not a man's right. Though ultimately, if you look at the Statue of Liberty, or if you look at this French Revolution, American War of Independence, they talk about rights of the man. In fact, there are a Bill of Rights, rights of the man. But here was the gentle lady who said, no, don't call it is man's rights. It's human right, because it includes both men and women. And therefore, the human rights includes the gender rights, inter alia, not other way around. Because if you say the human, so are women. And therefore, human rights has a broader perspective. And the fundamental aspects of the human rights are right to life. So whether you are a human, whether you're transgender, whether you are a woman, whether you are a child, whether you are a transgender, nobody, whether you are a rich or poor, every human being is entitled to adhere to his life. So nobody can take it out. As whether the government states things that. But life is precious and that need to protect. It's right to life. Right. Similarly, right, to look at the equality. So talk about equality, liberty, dignity, life. These are foundations of human rights. And on this four, there lies the essence of. And since I am an Odia, I don't have studied much Odia anyway, but any case. But when I remember some of the lines, one of the greatest person of Odia, so we keep on forgetting him because he was not a political figure. He was neither our contemporary Modi, or he was not erstwhile Nehru. So nobody bothered about. But we talk about, at least we remember as Utkalmanika Pavandadas, in Karakavita, he writes in that. Swadhina Aharapani, Swadhina Vihara, Swadhina Samitipuri, Swadhina Sanstiti, Charistambe Manavara Samada Sanstiti. The Manav was human being. What are they required? Swadhina Aharapani, Swadhina Vihara. The food, right to food, you late. Freedom to move. Freedom to think. And freedom to actually chart in the fourth dimension. And all these four lights in human life. If you take them away, human being doesn't become human being. In political science, David held rights. In these rights, that these liberties are essential, freedoms are essential for human being, because it allows him to express the flowering of human personality. So if I am a poet, if I am a creative writer, if I am a painter, if I am a speaker, and you have not allowed to speak, allowed to write, allowed to express, then what happened? then you are caging me like a bird. You are not allowing, you are just giving me an existence, not life. That is why I said, so standard of life, we will certain thing. But first thing that is standards. But first we will live. You just give us a life only. And that is where Supreme Court said some judgments. That it is not the life, it is this shuns this dignity, shuns the equality, shuns the liberty. The human being has no distinction between animal and human. And that is why Aristotle said long back, the distinction that is man as a social animal. Why? What distinguishes the social? And he meant social and political. And today's context, I mean, these are rights. Once you look over the rights, because human beings always carry along with him nothing else but a catalog of rights. So those rights are social rights, political rights, economic rights. Now these rights also include human rights. The right to participate politically, right to interact with the people, right, freedom to movement, freedom to seek food, freedom to employment, and you think about this, they're rights. And these rights also should be available to all human beings, which till now not given to the women. Because we practice them, so we excluded them. That's why there is exclusion and there is discrimination. So this both the institutional setup where they are access to limited. There are theories which are called glass ceiling theory. I won't get into because I don't think I have that much of time with me. Because if I speak more, then I will take your time out from discussion. Because personally, I would like to have a discussion. But therefore, I don't get into the glass ceiling theory. But I would say there are opportunities available, but opportunities are not given to them because the women, like in Indian army earlier or Air Force and Navy, that he cannot be there. The reasons, many reasons when you think about women, what are they doing? They say, okay, they are teachers and nurses, professors at best. But nobody talk about then women architects, women engineers, women aerospace engineers. No, Kalpana Chawla is an exception. But the reality is different. So therefore, the rules are different. And therefore, it is time to think. They're bringing the notion of equality and not person of which gender they are, but whether they have the interest, their capability, they have the willingness to do that, and so on. And a few years ago, I was interacting with a women assistant commandant of in PSF, and she was leading, and somebody said in our team that another inspector said, "No, take care of women." So his instructor said, "Sir, don't worry, you take care of yourself. If you feel ill or sick, she has the ability to carry you on her shoulder and walk for 20 kilometers. That's the power of that. Because as a woman, now we think they are not. And I as a man, I think I can run. But how much? I cannot run faster than that time of P.T. Usha or Sri Abraham. So therefore, it is not about being a person of that. It's about the abilities. And God has created different abilities, different individuals. And you would know many years ago, women are not practicing the Olympics. Until somebody participated in the Olympics, disguised as a man. And then after winning one, she became so euphoric that she lost, and then people get to know she's a woman. And she was penalized, punished. But then they realized they need to bring into that. So such things are happening. And law has played a significant role, whether it's a transformation of these things or not. Especially the two things I will say, the laws which are relevant in our university setup. Now, one is the sexual harassment, and one is second is ragging. So ragging comes many times. And now earlier it was physical. Now in open school, you will have it now online. So while you look at the COVID cases, COVID time, everybody is online. There's also a number of online complaints came from women saying that their bosses are asking them in odd hours and they are not wearing proper clothes when they are interacting with them, which is against the dignity of a woman. So the online transactions, online communications has also created the online, what is it we call our cyber crimes. So therefore, one has to cyber stalking, cyber harassing, cyber squatting. These are new things are coming, and we need to deal with them. And most of the time, they are intended to change. Like your relationship is very good, boyfriend and girlfriend. It's very common now. And then at some moment of process, you share photographs, you share statements. Now somebody put them in Facebook. Either they want in order to bring you to them in a broken relationship, or exploit them, or threaten them, penalize them, whatever. And these are criminal activities, blackmailing them. But these are happening. So in a sense, I would say, of course, the law is there to protect. But as we say in Odia, so why you should do better? And they say in English, better to be safe than sorry. And therefore, it is relevant to say that to contemporary cases, whether it is ragging in universities or sexual harassment, we need to be very careful about the concept of gender. And these are all laws are there, rules are there, very penalized. The rape laws are there, POSCO acts are there, which are trying to protect women more, our children especially, children more, and to bring a more, to make a, as contemporary trend, to a more equal, inclusive, participatory, empowered society. And the two cases I wanted to share with you, one was this leading role in developing human rights jurisprudence in India. And one of them was the former Chief Minister of Odisha, S. Nandini Satpathy versus State of Odisha, or what is called P.L. Dani versus Nandini Satpathy. Right, that's his case. And second case was Nilbati Bera versus State of Odisha. So both cases, one was again, arresting women before sunset, where it required that if you are going to arrest women, there must be women police officer to arrest. And not before sunrise, unless until there is a criminal severe charges, not before sunrise and not after sunset, not calling them to the police station. Right, there are guidelines. Similarly, in Nilbati Bera cases, it was custodial death. The woman fought hard because her son was missing and she was died in police custody. Nobody wanted to give a report. So, women have played a larger role, especially in Odisha, to bring the culprit to under the clutches of law and create just what is called in law, just, fair, and equal society. So these are also essential to human rights. In contemporary human rights paradigm, if you think of equality, liberty, justice, freedom, dignity. So like in Nehru and Panchashil, so we are these are the new Panchashil, where you can look for equality, justice, liberty, dignity, freedom. And if these are all given to us, and I think that is essential that we can be a much better society, where we can both empower freedom, free human society, or to country, to conclude in the Marxian sense, we can where human being have an active, conscious, sensual human being, enjoying to being a human in the world. And they said even God has to take part in the world because the world is a nice place. So it's important to feel nice, feel welcomed. And that is why when she was reading my biography, my statement, I said, look, I worked in the PC and Trinity Act, where we are denying a girl child to take birth in this world. And that's a tremendous problem. So therefore, it is imperative that we see that it's a welcome world, it's a nice world, it's a beautiful world, abundance of nature, abundance, there are fragrance in flower, there are tallness in mountains, there are dews in there are beautiful skies, moonlight, and so. And we need to enjoy that. And once you need to enjoy that, to be living as a human being, then it's imperative that that human being should be equal, just, inclusive, participatory, empowered. And that's what I wanted to share with you. I think I'm running out of my time. So thank you very much, especially to Pratap Babu for asking me to be part of this thing. I don't know whether I have been good as a speaker or I have been failed as a speaker. I don't know, but I think I tried. And it's important, as I say, it is essential to try, because result is not in hand. As I say, karmanya vadhikarasti ma phaleshu kadachanam. So I have tried to see whatever my task was given, and now you will share that. And after this, I will take a few questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Now,
when we talk about gender, especially gender equality, it is at the heart of human rights. Despite much progress made in securing women's rights globally, millions of women and girls continue to experience discrimination and violence, being denied of their equality, dignity, and autonomy, and even a life. This discrimination and violence against women and girls, deeply rooted in the fabric of societies, is persistent and systematic. But I must say that there are few areas that need to be looked at. May it be perception of women with mental illness, the human rights of women with mental illness, including their right to access mental health care, right to equality, and right to protection from cruelty, inhuman, and degrading treatment, among others. However, as said by Dr. Mohanty, we need to work together and need to exercise autonomy to our fundamental rights. Thank you so much, sir, for your words and such an enlightening session. Having a guest like you on this platform is the best we can do. We have got few questions from our audience, and I would like Dr. Mohanty to address one or two. So the question is, despite of being so many laws, still we are seeing the increased rate of divorce cases, domestic violence. Hence, what are some of the behavioral aspects that must be inducted in the behavior of the house member to avoid such circumstances?
Well, thank you for that question. I think, you see, like many other things, law is not a panacea. If law would have been a panacea or problem in India, there should have been no problem in India because you are an over-legislated country. So what is actually required? No, they create an active, strong, vibrant civil society where you take up these things, number one. And secondly, we also look at, as sociologist, I will say, we have to have a system of socialization and what is called a gender socialization. Now, unfortunately, what happens? Well, now you look at very simple things. If I have a girl, I have a daughter, and it's a 2-year-old. What I do, or a 3-year-old, I buy for her. Know what? I buy for her dolls. I said a girl will see dolls. If it's a boy, even if it's a sissy, I will buy him for the guns, expecting that he will be, talking violence. So these are socialization problems. When this girl wants to go with me, my daughter fights with me. Sir, Papa, I want to go to the market. I said, no, but when my son is reluctant, I forces him to go with me. And then what happens when the daughter is pushed inside house? She doesn't learn the skills of huckstering, of negotiation, or participation in public debate. And that is therefore, over a period of time, her self-confidence is gone. Because the skills set up, interacting in public, speaking in public, putting her views despite difference is not there simply because she has not been properly socialized. So therefore, it is not illegally. And wherever they are, for example, Indira Gandhi could become, I was telling you, could become prime minister because Nehru has no other son. And that is the dilemma of Sonia Gandhi. So Priyanka Gandhi could have been a better one, but because we have a son difference syndrome. So naturally it happened in higher class, so it happened. So the daughters who are there, no, because we have not taken them seriously or think our socialization process is defective. We think, no, they are there to take care of the family. In 1902, there was a case called Broadway versus Illinois in America. And there George writes, if you read the quotation, George writes that women are made of tender. Women are very delicate. So therefore, they need to be in 4 corners of the house. Somebody like, if you read an English poem, I don't know how many of you are in English literature. There was a gentleman called Edward Longfellow. He writes, man for the sword and for the needle see, man for the field and for the man for the field and for the hearth see, man to command and women to obey, all else confusion. No, it was writing Edward Longfellow in England. So the idea is that the problem with this society, because the way we want to socialize, and socialization is a very, very important process. If we teach our child, our male child, look, you should not behave with women this way, because that's not the way. But we tend, no, you have to dominate them. So that is why it's a problem with culture. It's not a problem with law. Law is only one aspect of it. We can penalize it. But the reality reforming has come from within society, within culture. And therefore, I put a higher pedestal on culture and our consciousness. You can call Srima as mother, Mother Teresa as mother. And that is it, but not as equalism. So therefore, this sort of understanding is very, very relevant to that. Thank you. Any other question?
Yes, sir. Now I would like to request Pratap Mohanty, sir, to ask his question.
Thank you for accepting our invitation. It's nice to hear from you. For us. Mine is not a question, but just understand things from the perspective of what it is. When we are encountering coming across news like the recent Russian aggression, the Palestinian and Lebanese questions and all that. You rightly actually out in your deliberation that Amartya Sen and Martha Nasbab's capability approach, wherein they have actually
Actually, I think there was some disturbances. So, Sagupta, could you just tell me the statement, because the last part I listened. So you talk about Martha Nussbaum's and Amartya Sen's capability index, capability approach. But before that, I missed it. So could somebody just highlight it, or you can write down? I will take note of it.
Sir, am I audible, sir?
Yes, yes.
Yes, actually, thing is that when I am talking about the recent Russian aggression and Palestinian issues and all that, and relating that to the capabilities approach by Amartya Sen and Martha Nussbaum, and coming back to India and Indian experience, we are talking about the Indian jurisprudence, human right, modern Indian laws. Actually, I'm struggling to understand as to, in order to actually provide an equalitarian society, wherein, as you have rightly mentioned, that we are not talking about women as a separate gender, rather we are talking the larger domain of human rights, consisting both the male and female. So where actually our society is approaching. So in spite of Indian jurisprudence, Indian law, human right perspective, new human right charters developing day by day, where actually we are moving.
Well, that's now I have heard it clearly. But first thing I should say that no, Pratap Bhai, because if I invited a guest, you should not put in trouble, right? That is why you should not have asked question. But anyway, the whole idea of examining the capability approach and see the human rights and see it in the context of international human rights. So what is happening in Ukraine? Yes, if you look at the way people are living, their people are suffering, and same with the Palestine also, the bombardment and so. But the idea is, as a theory, as a human rights doctrine, or if you know as the international law we often call as a soft law, because the essential concept of the law is enforcement. So who will enforce the law? Like what is happening in human rights violation in China? Who is enforcing the law? What is happening in America? See, this only question is that we are trying to do, that we are creating a consensus and approaching before their conscience that look, this is the pattern and you should follow it up. So therefore, the theory and practice is different. And as long as the whole global civil society not become strong enough and condemn and do things, nothing can happen theoretically, now practically. So our practice and theory is different. For example, we have tried so hard, during many years of the Taliban's moving them away from Afghanistan. But ultimately, same superpower has allowed them to come over. And now we are seeing what is happening to them. What is happening to women education? They guaranteed that we will do so. So therefore, the international politics, international practice, and the theory are different. But as it happened, at least in during the Cold War time, there are two superpowers. Now, even now there is only one superpower, and even then the balance of power is not maintained, and even then the superpower are not interested to exercise their domain or influence, because it cannot happen by force. So it has to happen not by coercion, but by consensus. So we are trying to bring that consensus. I am looking forward to the world where our agencies like ILO, agencies like WHO, agencies like WTO can force the organizations, rogue states to follow the principles, at least basic natural minimum principle of protecting and safeguarding human rights. Till then time, we have to live in this sort of vacuum. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for addressing the questions. Now, I would like to request our esteemed registrar, sir, Professor Manas Ranjan Pujari, to honor the keynote speaker, Dr. Mohanty, with a token of appreciation. Over to you, sir.
Professor Mohanty, this is on behalf of Odisha State Open University in appreciation of your time and your excellent deliberation today. Thank you very much. We'll be sending it to you.
Thank you very much, Manas bhai. That is a nice gift, and with my photograph. I don't look so handsome, but I look better in the picture. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I would like to thank our Honorable Vice-Chancellor, sir, for giving us this opportunity to provide this platform. I am equally thankful to Professor Pujari, esteemed Registrar, and Sri Nalini Ranjan Sarangi, esteemed COF, for their kind support and patience in organizing such webinar that boosts our knowledge. I am highly obliged and thankful to Professor Mohanty for sharing his knowledge, and especially being in such a busy schedule, he accepted our proposal. Thank you so much, sir. Last but not the least, I am thankful to all our audience for being a patient listener.